Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 330. And we've got a new guest that we haven't had on, but he's an old friend of mine. So we're going to get to him in just a minute. But we're going to do what we always do and just kind of go around the room and introduce ourselves and talk about anything that we got going on. For me, you're on my channel, so this is where you can find me on YouTube. You can also find my stuff at circworks.com. And just be, pay attention because I'm going to be talking more about the Kickstarter I've got coming up. Right now, I'm just waiting on. I commissioned a variant cover, so once that variant cover is done and ready to go, then I'll have a better understanding of when I'm going to launch it. But ideally, it will be sometime next month, which is tomorrow. So, next month is tomorrow. So the Kickstarter isn't, but I just want to let everyone know that it's coming. So just be aware of it, and I'll let people know. And that's, of course, for my comic book, Young and the Dead. It's a kids versus zombie adventure story. And the Goonies, Monster Squad, E.T., or like Stranger Things, but with zombies, then you'll probably dig it. So just be aware of that. So we're going to kick things over to my co-host, Josh. Josh, what's going on?
How's it going? So if you guys are in the Southern California area, I know it's a trek for those of you like a little bit further towards LA. But in the Antelope Valley at the Palmdale Barnes and Noble, if you can hear me over my dogs, I'll be doing a signing of my recent release of Jacob's Apartment, which is a graphic novel done in the vein of Ghost World or Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind, sort of a doomed romance where dreams and reality interweave that kind of talks about the sorts of questions that can challenge even the strongest of faith. And so that'll be happening at 1:00 p.m. on this Saturday at the Palmdale Barnes & Noble, which I'm really excited about. So you should pick up that book and come get it signed. I think we're going to be doing like a little drinking meetup afterwards at Bravery Brewing, which is a really good microbrewery up in this area. And then also Two Stories is my first graphic novel, and that's still available. And that's a slice of life autobiographical comic that talks openly about my journey dealing with depression, as well as caregiving for somebody with panic disorder. And it tells fun stories like, a childhood growing up dressing as Indiana Jones for an entire year at school before cosplay was a thing. So those are my wares, and that's what I got.
All right. Okay, and our guest tonight is Shawn Demumbrum. We go way back. We were in Cub Scouts together, right? Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts or
Weeblos, yeah.
Oh, nice.
yeah.
You guys, I was in the California Weeblos. So.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we knew each other as kids, and we kind of lost touch. And then somewhere, I don't know how many years ago, we probably met up again at a con or something, I assume. Yeah. And we're both doing comics now, which is awesome. So that's kind of serendipitous, but so Shawn, you want to tell everyone kind of who you are? Is there anything you want to pitch? Anything you got going on, or and then we'll kind of lead in the topic after that.
Sure, absolutely. My name's Shawn Demumbrum, and I have been in the comic industry a number of different ways. I owned a retail store, Spaz Dog Comics, from 2003 to 2006 to 2009 here in Phoenix, Arizona. And I also was the manager of comic book programming from 2013 to 2016. And in between that, those times.
Is that Phoenix Comic Con or?
Phoenix Comic Con, yeah. I was responsible for all the comic book programming, the panels that they put on and everything. So I had to coordinate with guests, and I helped them with some of their guest invites too, which was a lot of fun. But in between that, starting in 2009, I started publishing comics, starting out with these little 6-page zine, sort of mini ash can sort of comics, and then I moved on to doing music anthologies, and that's basically since 2011. That's what I've been. The bulk of my creative work has been using doing different music anthologies inspired by different bands. The Smiths, the Pixies, and Nine Inch Nails. And so my latest book that I put together during the pandemic was the collected version of 4 Nine Inch Nails comics. It's called In This Together, stories inspired by the songs of Nine Inch Nails. It's available on eBay and Amazon if you're interested. And so that's where I'm at right now. So
awesome. And we got your social
That's
media
rad.
links in the description, so you can
Awesome.
either type in Spaz Press or you can just click on the links in the description. So I'm just going to pull up the chat so I can see what's going on in there while we're talking. All right. Okay. So another thing, Shawn, that you may have glossed over. I mean, didn't you guys set a world record for doing a comics project?
We did. Yeah. That was in 2014 at the Amazing Arizona Comic Convention, which is no longer around. We set the record. Well, yeah, we set the record for the fastest time to produce a comic. It was just a little over 11 hours, and the most contributors to a comic, which was 115. And so we had 115 creators. We started out in the morning, and just someone would write a page, like the writers would write 2 to 3 pages of comics, of script, and then we'd bring in the next writer, and he would have to read those 3 pages and write 2 more pages, and then we'd bring in the next writer, and they would write 2 more pages on top of that after reading the first 5, and so on and so forth, until you got to 25 pages of work. And while that's happening, we're also bringing an artist to draw the pages. And to make it simple, we had the writers write 4 panel pages, so it's all consistent, the same size. It made it a little bit easier for us, because then we take the script, show the artist, and we'd print out, this is panel 1, this is panel 2, and give them to the different artists. And then there was coordination within that, where, like, the first appearance of a character, you have to use that as the style guide for the next person. And then, if they introduce another character, which they introduced like 6 different characters throughout this. So it was all this juggling of, okay, we've got this main character and he's falling like this. This is the style guide for that. So he needs to look like this, it was a real challenge. And then at the end of it, I ended up scanning the pages in and then lettering them to get to that deadline. We didn't beat the original record. Was set by Mark Millar of Marvel fame and now Netflix fame, and he set it at his convention in England. And one of my friends, Jesse James, who owns Jesse James Comics, we found out that he had set the record, and it was only like 60 contributors to that. And we said to ourselves, we can't let an American institution like comic books have a record set by someone in England, because I mean, comic books are like, they're 2 like things about America that are uniquely American, and that's jazz and comic books. Everything else is kind of an import or a modification of other things from outside the United States. And so we had set, Jesse was like, he was the talent wrangler and the promotions guy. At one point during it, Robert Kirkman was at the convention, and we had reached out to Robert to see if he would be interested in writing 2 pages, and he was just too busy, and he ended up not doing it. But for about 15 minutes, there was the possibility that Robert Kirkman was going to write 2 pages of this comic. And so that was really crazy, and that was a lot of fun. We did end up getting Rob Liefeld to draw the cover. And so that was really cool. But we had so many great artists that were at the convention, as well as local artists that came and participated in that. And we tried to attempt to break it again at a few years later at Amazing Las Vegas Comic-Con, and we just didn't have as many people come to it, and we've since lost the record for the most contributors. But because it's really weird, because I mean, it should be a coupled sort of record. They should both go together, because that's how they were set. I mean, I could sit down and probably over the course of 15 years get 300 people to draw different aspects of a page, and put together a comic and have 300 contributors to a comic book. But it's different than trying to get 115 people to do it in less than 12 hours. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, and quite a challenge. So
yeah, and one thing I don't think you mentioned was that not only do you have to create it, but in that time you printed it, right, and distribute it, or at least didn't you?
Well, I mean, technically you only had to have it printed out in some form. So yeah, I had a color laser printer that we printed it out on and put it together so that we could show it as proof of concept. And then we actually had to deal with a printer, a local printer, and we had, by the next day we had, was it 200 copies? I think it was 200 copies printed up, because part of the record at that point was that you had to have sold 300 copies of the comic book as part of the record for whatever reason. And of course, when Mark did his record, he just took it to Marvel, and they printed it out. And so it was, their record was like really, really weak compared to what we did, because he did the story based on his character Superior, and so he probably already had some inclination of a story in his mind, whereas ours was created on the fly. It involved the coordination of 10 different writers, and so it was much more of a challenge than just one person who he probably wrote the entire script in, and then had people come in and do the panels. So I mean, either way, it's a challenge to get it done in that amount of time. But it definitely, but yeah, we made it more complicated by the way that we set up, because no one had talked about what the story was going to be, so they had to read those pages before they got to it. So
yeah, that's crazy. I guess I didn't know the full story. For some reason, I thought it might have just been like sort of almost like an anthology, but I didn't realize that it was that every it was a continuous story.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah, that was it was kind of like such a challenge, and such the coordination of all that, because you're also pulling people from their tables at a convention to draw a panel. So you want to be cognizant of their time and not have their time wasted. So that was getting that flow of, we've got these many tables, these many spots for people to sit and draw.
Did you
And
have? Oh,
it
go
all
ahead,
had to
Sean.
be like recorded, because this is something that they don't tell you, that isn't widely known about Guinness Book of World Records. They don't just send people out to the record places to validate records. You have to pay them to do it, and it's $10,000.
Wow.
Oh, geez.
I didn't know
to get someone to come out, and of course, but then what they can do is they print out the certificates and they hand them to you there, if you do that. But yeah, so you see all these, they make their money from, the world's largest pizza, and having someone sponsor that and bring out the people to evaluate it. So then we had to go through the process of documenting all the stuff. We had have signatures from witnesses who were there during the entire time and whatever. We sent in photos of the stopwatches that we used with the times, and all the recorded footage of the record. So we had a camera set up so that you could see the entire thing as it happened. So we had to provide that to them. So
wow, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was a real challenge. It was, for the most part, it was me and Jesse doing it.
Yeah.
We had some other people that kind of helped with the wrangling and with kind of the coordination, but for the most part, it was just me and Jesse going to people and asking them for their time and talent to be able to create that. So
And did you have the people lined up already, or as you were going, were you going out to tables and stuff? Hey, can you draw this panel?
No, we started a couple weeks in advance, and we had a list of people, and we did. I mean, the convention gave us space, and they gave us electricity.
Yeah.
They gave us the basic things that we needed. We had reached out to them about asking people about doing this, and it was a bit of a challenge to get them to reach out to the people that were at the convention. So we basically went through the list and saw who we knew and reached out to them. But there were a couple people that were kind of a surprise. We got Mark Silvestri to draw a panel by going to him and asking him about it. And Paul Jenkins wrote 2 pages for the comic book. So we had some people that we actually were able to bring in. But part of really, Jesse spent the bulk of Friday of the convention going around and asking people if they'd like to be involved and kind of pitching it to them. And then Saturday is when we got set up and started and everything. So it was kind of crazy lugged around a computer and a printer, a scanner, all that stuff, and all kinds of art supplies. So yeah, it was quite the endeavor, but it was nice being able finally. I think it took us about actually a year for them to acknowledge the record. So, and we got into one of the books. It was actually one of the kids Guinness Book of World Records books.
Yeah, my son used to collect all of those and the Ripley's, believe it or not.
Yeah. So it was one of the kids ones that we got into. I think it was in 2016. But we got our picture in there and talked about the record and everything. So
did that
what it was called, what the comic was called?
Oh yeah.
Someone had just brought it up on my social media not too long ago. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
So, while you're looking for it, just like with the Guinness Book of World Records thing, does that help a lot to kind of generate like publicity for your publishing as well? Like, I'd imagine like there must have been some kind of like news articles and stuff written about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I had a pretty good relationship. Well, I still do, with Rich Johnson at Bleeding Cool, and
Nice.
so I was able to get him to. Well, Jesse and I were able to get him to publish some articles on it.
Awesome.
So, but not, I mean, not a lot of it. It's interesting because it's like for the people like Mark Silvestri and Rob Liefeld, they'll probably never acknowledge that they have a Guinness Book of World Records. But for the people that were the local people and people that were just starting, more independent comic book creators,
Yeah.
they let me see. I'm checking to see if it's got the title here. And those people were so appreciative of it, and they constantly had it on their feed that they're a world record holder and everything like that. So that really made our day because because you just, I mean, that's something that they'll always remember. I mean, they'll never get to draw, the X-Men or anything like that, but they put their mark on comic books in some way. So
It's awesome.
yeah, so yeah, I'm still looking for it. I'm trying, I should have it somewhere, the name, but
is it an unusual name or something?
it's like it was just like something like I keep thinking it's like Death Comes to Frogtown or something like that, but it's not at all. Let me see if it says, oh, here we go. Yeah, we just, on the cover we just call it the world record attempt.
Nice. That's a pretty good title.
But it did have a title because it was oh, here it is. Nobody goes down to Robotown is what the title of it was. And
I love
yeah. Yeah, and that was yeah, so yeah, nobody goes down to Robotown. That was the name of it. But and any place that you look, it'll probably say world record attempt because that's what we put on there.
That's
And
awesome.
we had the date and that it was in Phoenix, Arizona and whatnot. So
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to just kind of call out a couple things because we have a really active chat right now, so I want to acknowledge some people. So first off, like Fear the Reaper said, first time I caught you guys live, been a fan for 3 years, I think. Well, welcome,
That's
dude.
awesome.
We very much appreciate that. And then we've
How
got,
long have we been doing this? I'm wondering.
I think about 3 years. Yeah, like maybe it might predate me, dude.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was some really fun stuff that was kind of occurring where it was they were kind of talking about some of what Shawn was just discussing. Where Frank Salazar, friend of the show, said that's how Captain Anarchy. This is like an inside joke. He has a character named Captain Courage, and we've been trying to prod him to make a parody called Captain Anarchy. And he said that's how it should be made, 115 creators making it in 12 hours. And then he said, he asked, he's like, is it like the 24-hour comic challenge where you need to come up with this story on the fly?
According to the world record, I mean, and these things change because when we went to go do it again after we had made the record, it seemed like the requirements had changed. They dropped some things and they added some things. But there is no requirement that it has to be on the fly. We imposed that on ourselves because we wanted to add some complexity, so it would be harder for other people to replicate that, possibly.
Yeah, it seems
Yeah.
like if you have to do it in a certain time, it makes sense for it to be on the fly. Because if you had it some of it pre-done, it's not really done in a certain. I assume the time frame was a big part of it, obviously, right?
Yeah, the time frame was
Yeah.
the big part of it. I mean,
Yeah.
because gain 100, like I said, you
Yeah.
could do 300 contributors on a 20-page comic where someone draws this portion and draws that portion. The requirements was that they only had to have a each person had to have some sort of impact on the comic book. So if you could make a 20 panel page and have different people doing different things on it, someone lettering, someone penciling, someone inking, someone coloring, and obviously a writer as well that does that. So the possibilities are endless. At one point, a few years ago, Marvel was doing their 80th year anniversary book, and they were saying that all these creators, they had a long list of creators that were going to be in there, and we thought, oh, they're going to go after the record for that, even though it was like a 64 or 80 page comic or something like that. We thought, oh, for sure they're piling all these artists on and they're going to go after the record, because ours was 25 pages, and I think Mark's was 20 pages. So we felt we were kind of pushing it at 25, considering most comics usually go maybe 23 at the most.
Yeah.
Although the standard lately has been 20 pages.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
I was just going to say it's so with Liefeld and Silvestri contributing. It's interesting. Todd McFarlane didn't get out of that since he's local to Arizona.
Well,
I mean, wasn't at the convention that year.
He wasn't at the convention. Yeah. I don't think any of us had really connections to Todd.
Yeah.
And he's really protective of his time.
Yeah.
Understandably, I mean, I think at the time he had some kids that were in high school maybe, and so he had to coordinate. Weekends were spent doing that rather than comic book conventions and things like that. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's kind of not necessarily what our topic's about, but definitely a very interesting story. So I thought we'd lead with that. So
that's great.
But so speaking of the topic, we always, if anyone's new to the Artcasters, you don't know that we usually give our guests the first opportunity to choose the topic. And because Shawn does a lot of these music anthologies, he wanted to talk about how music influences art and also comics, because a lot of what we talk about here is comics related. So I don't know, based on that, is there anything you want to kick off with that? Why you wanted to bring that up? And I mentioned it to Shawn beforehand that Josh is a musician as well, so I'm sure it influences his comics. And I actually have done a comic similar to the kind that you publish, 4-pager for this anthology, Werewolves and Unicorns, where it was actually based on the Police song Synchronicity 2. So I did a 4-pager on that somewhere in here. Yeah, here.
So it was I don't know, it's just been kind of interesting because I grew up like in the 70s, and comic books were really had it seemed like they had a renaissance around that time, because there was the Super Friends on Saturday morning cartoons. Spider-Man had a TV show. At some point he had a cartoon show as well, more in the 80s though. But I had a calendar. I mean, Batman '66 was
in reruns. Yep.
in reruns.
Yeah, we're the same age, so
yeah.
Hey, Jib's in the chat. He's probably getting ready for his show after this. So, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, no problem. And so, I mean, you had the Incredible Hulk on TV, Wonder Woman, just all kinds of different things happening around there. So I didn't really collect comics back then. And I had a few comics. I had some Star Wars comics. When they did the adaptation, I had the Treasury size one when that came out of Star Wars. That famously has Jabba the Hutt in it in his original sort of form before he became kind of a slug.
Nice. Is that the one where Yoda's a little like strange too, or no?
No, not that I recall, because I had the Empire Strikes Back adaptation, and
nice.
it was actually in like a little paperback form, and I read through that like it was the Bible. It was just like
yeah, I remember the Jabba the Hutt. The Jabba the Hutt was based on, I think, another character that was actually in the cantina that they just, I think, modeled after. If I'm correct, he had like kind of whiskers and like.
That's amazing.
I think I remember that comic.
Yeah. But so I was kind of tangentially into comics. I had a few. I had. I mean, at that time, you could pick them up at the grocery store or Kmart, different places that. Once the direct market took over, they didn't really. They disappeared from grocery stores and everywhere. So, but then I really listened to a lot of music when I was a kid, and so that became where I put my focus and my time and whatnot instead of comics. But then somewhere around my junior year, the summer, I think it was the summer before my junior year, one of my friends from high school, he found a bookstore that had comic books in the back. And so I had been kind of interested in checking out what comics were, because one of the kids in my one of the kids in my class had a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles hardback and I saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I was like, what the heck is that? I need to find out what that is.
And that's before, like, obviously before the cartoon, right?
Well before the cartoon.
Yeah.
Back when they were still in like single digits on the issues.
And had red bandanas.
Yep.
Probably.
Yeah. Well, they were black and white,
but the covers, they all had red bandanas back then. Yeah, because I just like to tell the story of my brother, who was, he discovered Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles super early, like probably on issue 3 or 4 or something like that. And he wanted to be a ninja for Halloween, and no one knew what he was. They were like, "Oh, you're a cute frog," or something like that. And then the following year, I think, or a year or two later, the cartoon and everything came out, and everyone was a Ninja Turtle. It was just so fun. But yeah, him and my mom or dad made the costume and everything. But yeah, it's funny.
Yeah. So yeah, I that reignited, because then we went to that bookstore, and they had every single Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle ripoff, like mildly microwaved, Kung Fu hamsters, and
so good.
geriatric gangrene gerbils, and all these. And so I picked up all of those. I didn't get any of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
But that kind of reignited my interest in it. And then there was a comic book store over at 35th and Greenway in Phoenix.
What was that place? What was it called? Was it Heroes?
It was Left Half Comics.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's where it was. Yeah. So that was, did you go to Greenway?
Yeah, I went to Greenway.
Oh, why didn't I know that?
I don't know.
Well, we had
I don't know why.
same year.
I don't know why we lost touch during high school. Because I mean, I don't know. We just were in different classes, I guess. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I was in the remedial classes. You're probably in the smart people class. But so yeah, Left Half Comics. I actually painted the mural on their window.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did. And I was in high school, so it wasn't that great in retrospect. Somewhere I think I got a really grainy picture of it, but yeah, I did that. I didn't get paid anything. I don't think he gave me any comics for that.
Oh wow. Yeah, but Left Half Comics, I walked in there and I started that reignited my love of superhero comics. So um, so then it was comics. And then in college, I got really into music again, even more so. But I started, like I said, I started in 2009 creating these little black and white comics, 6-page comics, working with artists that I knew through owning the comic book store. And I'd said to them, hey, why don't we start creating comics? If you have characters or a story that you want, I'll write the story, you do the art, and we'll go about it that way. So we broke it up into 6 pages because it was easy to do, and you could do 6 pages as divided a normal comic up into 6-page acts.
Yeah.
And three comics would equal a full kind of issue, and it would go through that 3-act structure that a lot of people use. And so we did that for a while. And then at one of the conventions, there was a Pirates versus Ninja anthology that came out. Jeff Pena, I don't know if you know Jeff.
Yeah. I don't know him personally. I've talked to him a couple times, but he probably doesn't remember who I am. But yeah, he's always at the conventions.
Yeah, Jeff and Thomas Healy, who is now the editor for Spawn Comics for Todd's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They put together an anthology called Pirates versus Ninjas, and it was just every story, and it was a little comic book anthology where it had like six different stories, 4 pages, around 4 pages each, and just dealing with how you put those two together, and what happens when you mix pirates and ninjas together, since they probably hadn't really had many confrontations in real life together. So I'm like, wow, that's a great idea to do an anthology of just a couple pages each. And I'm like, what could because I knew a lot of creators, and I'm like, what could I get them to stop focusing on whatever project they're working on to do a short 2 to 10 page story for. And looking around all the people that I knew, I thought, well, I know a lot of people that like the Smiths.
Yep.
And so I reached out to different people, and they were excited about it. And so I started creating a list of people that would work on it, and got them to kind of commit to a story. And it was really loosely editorial at that point, but it slowly became evident that that I needed to have some rules and things in place. And so that things.
Just real quick, because I actually want to delve into that like pretty deeply, because we've had a couple people who've organized anthologies on the show before, and every editor, including my current editor, like at Graphic Mundi, who put together like COVID Chronicles and stuff, it's like I've heard the logistics behind this kind of stuff. And so like I think for our listeners, like that would be really interesting. Like, what went wrong that made you have to like kind of come up with a more clear structure when it came to like organizing the anthology.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, part of it was too many bosses. Like everyone had their idea of what it would be, and what the length would be and what this was. So I just kind of had to focus on, okay, we don't want anything over. I think at that point it was 2 to 8 pages.
Yeah.
We don't really want a 1-page comic. We want something that's at least 2 pages, but something that's less than 8, because if everyone took up as many pages, then the book would be huge, and it ended up being huge. It ended up being, I think initially we were looking at like 70 pages or something like that, and it ended up being 170 pages, the first one.
Yeah.
So part of it was getting the tone right.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be I wanted these to be love letters to the bands.
Yeah.
And we had a few stories that once I didn't really ask people for their ideas on the stories. I just asked for page commitments. But I started getting some stories in, and I'm like, oh, this isn't going to work because it's not very referential to the band. It's kind of puts them in a negative light or whatnot.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that quickly became a rule, is the band can't be a part of the story.
Got it. So like members of the band taking that out of it and being like, it has to just be influenced by the band, right?
It just has to be influenced by the band, just kind of like using the song as a jumping off point.
Yeah.
Using maybe some lyrics in it as the basis of the story, that sort of thing. So really focusing on what it is and what it isn't, for people.
That's awesome. So that's a restriction, because like you started getting submissions where it's like somebody drawing like Morrissey like not sleeping with people or something, like, and then it's like, well, that's not like complimentary to the band. Let's do like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
I mean, these are like more like guidelines than rules, because there are many times when I broke the rules on these things. But yeah, the one story was just about, it really ended up being about Johnny Marr and Morrissey and their breakup, and whose fault it was and that sort of thing. And it's like, I don't really want this to be about that,
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, at that point, like I said, it was just me and a bunch of people that I knew putting this together. So it was like, oh, we'll probably print up, maybe 200 copies. We'll do it print on demand, and it'll be at a convention. We were focusing on having it at the Tucson Comic-Con that year in 2011. And we're like, well, we'll put it together for the convention, then everyone will have a book. And, then like if someone buys a book at one booth, they'll want to get the signature of someone in another booth, and then they'll see their stuff and see if they want to buy it, so it gives exposure to everyone from that standpoint. And at the time, Kickstarter hadn't been around for too long. I think maybe a year or two in 2011 when we were looking at it. And so someone said, well, we should look into Kickstarter. And I'm like, well, let's figure out what we're doing first and what the structure is. So eventually we end up putting together a Kickstarter campaign. And we launched it, and it ended up being really well. I guess I should back up a little bit before I get there. I had one of the Tucson artists create a cover, and the cover is Morrissey popping open his shirt, buttons flying, and he's at a concert, so the crowd's in the front of the picture, he's popping them open, and he has like a superhero costume underneath, and that kind of played into the whole superheroes used to be like everyone's idol, and now rock stars are the idols and whatever. And so that was the image. That was our cover image. So we put out the Kickstarter. I hit launch on it.
Sorry, real quick. Sorry to cut you off. So the Kickstarter, when you launch it, is the whole book done at that point, or it's like you have? Oh wow. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's not completely done. I'm still getting artwork coming in. I'm still having people talk about doing it. I think this was in like June of that year.
Okay.
And the convention was in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a tight deadline.
Well, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And so we launched the Kickstarter, and it's like early in the morning, and Bleeding Cool. I sent Bleeding Cool a blurb on what we're doing with the image of Morrissey with the shirt popping and everything, and they put up an article about it, and it just so happens that it coincides with Morrissey talking about, I think it was some foreign country. He had some sort of massacre, or like, just a mass shooting or something like that. And Morrissey at a concert said, this compares nothing to what KFC and McDonald's do on a daily basis. So he got in the news stream, and since Bleeding Cool had that image up,
oh wow,
we went from just having a few pledges to being fully funded to, okay, now what do I do for stretch goals within a very short period of time. And we, like myself and the cover artists, were getting all kinds of media requests from all over the world to talk about the book. And because I think a lot of people thought the cover, it's that you can't judge a book by its cover, but most people do, especially in comic books. They look at the cover and they say, well, this is what it's going to be about.
Yeah.
They thought it was going to be Morrissey as a superhero rather than anthology. So it gained a lot of traction. We decided to do black and white because it was cheaper. So that got funded, and I got quotes, and we went with a Canadian printer that does, at the time, did most of like Marvel and DC's printing.
Oh, like Le Bon Font or Cubicore? I forget which they
Cubicore.
call them.
Yeah, it was Cubicore, okay. And
they
changed.
Used to be Le Bon Font. Yeah. Okay. Or now it's Le Bon Font. I can't remember.
It used to be Cubicore, and now it's that other company. So we ordered the books through there. We got them in time for the convention. I actually had shirts printed up for everyone that had that Morrissey image on it. So
nice.
At Tucson Comic Con that year, you couldn't walk anywhere without seeing one of those shirts.
You're just seeing Morrissey everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, that's pretty amazing. And I bet those shirts would sell regardless, because people just like Morrissey and the Smiths. I mean,
yeah, I didn't print up extras. I just did it as kind of an extra bonus for the people that contributed to the book, as far as contributed artwork and stories and whatever to the book. So, but yeah, so then we decided to do another volume. So we did another volume that did not succeed on Kickstarter, but I funded the book anyway. And then the next thing, I wanted to keep going, because we had one cover for Morrissey and one cover for Johnny Marr as a superhero kind of guy.
Oh, sweet.
And so we still had two other members of the Smiths to to cover, but it seemed like it was kind of losing steam at that point. And so I kind of pivoted and said, okay, now who are some other people that I could get to do stories? And it revolved around the Pixies, because I knew a lot of people that were fans of the Pixies.
Yeah, like honestly, at the top of this, when you said Pixies, I was like, okay, because I've gotten to the point where I don't do a ton of anthologies unless it's like a really good friend or something asking for a favor or something like that. But if somebody came to me and was like, "Do you want to do like 2 or 3 stories on the Pixies?" I'd be like, "I'm dropping whatever my deadlines are." Yeah, of course, because it's like it's the Pixies. I mean, yeah. So, similar to the Smiths, you're picking good bands to do this with. I think.
Well, I'm
Because
picking
that does touch on that, like the audiophile, which a lot of cartoonists are huge audiophiles. Like we're usually into punk rock or hip hop or like indie rock, and like so being able to like stoke that in cartoonists, you're gonna get good work, you know, and get people who want to do it, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, before I go on to what we did with the Pixies, I should probably back up and talk about some of the things dealing with rights.
I was curious
I was
about that.
curious,
I had a in Jacob's apartment. I had I had done like a quote from Simon and Garfunkel as like as somebody's driving. There's a whole sequence that had the lyrics, and then I had to like reach out for licensing rights. And then by the time like the publication date came, like the licensing rights didn't come in. And what's weird was the cost actually wasn't that crazy. And then I think I had to like reach out to like Not a Surf too because I had 2 areas. I ended up just taking him out of the comic, and the comic, like I was lucky because it just kind of worked without. But from that experience, I was like, oh, okay, this is a lot different than like because prior to that, I've done very indie publishing, so like it was a logistical headache. So I was wondering, how do you handle that when you're talking about like the bands in general?
So I mean, some of the stories had lyrics. So we had about 9 lines of lyrics that were in the collected 13 stories that we had in there. So so what I did was I started to research that before we got to the point of publishing the book. And so I reached out to there was a gentleman that did a comic book kind of biography called Freddie and Me, a coming of age Bohemian Rhapsody.
Nice.
Mike Dawson. And so I reached out to him and I said, hey, I see that you did this book and it has the members in there and everything, and you've got their likenesses and everything. What did you have to do for that? And he said, well, I was able to reach out to the band, and the band was able to, they gave me permission to do it. He said, but I didn't use any lyrics in it. I didn't use any lyrics at all in the book.
Yeah, when I did my story, it was a silent comic, my one based on Synchronicity 2. Other than the title was based on a line from it, but it was, you know, that was it.
So then I also reached out to Damien Hurd, who did a book called A Strange Day, which was more of like his experience on a day ditching school and listening to Cure songs. And I don't think he had any lyrics use in it either. And so I'm like, well, what do I need to do this? So I started doing some research and determined that like for mechanical use or for like if you wanted to create a cover or if you wanted to do include a song in a movie or something, that goes through one department, one group of music publishers. But if you wanted like sheet music or if you wanted to include it in written works or things like that, you go through Hal Leonard. And so I reached out to them. I filled out the form. I said, this is what I want to do. This, here's the use that I have. Here's copies of the pages that we did. And I didn't hear from them. I didn't Didn't hear from them. 6 months into it, well, I think it was like 2 or 3 months into it, I heard back from them. At that point, we had already printed the book, and I heard back, hey, we got your request. We're looking into it. We have to contact the artist or whatever. And then I didn't hear anything for a long time. And then 6 months later, I hear from someone else, because the publishing rights are split between, for the Smiths, are split between Johnny Marr and Morrissey. And so I didn't know which was which, but I heard back from one, and then I heard back from the other. And I heard back from the other, like, we had already published the book, and it was already in the hands of some of the other members of the band, actually, who don't have a good relationship with Johnny or Morrissey, because there's a whole court case around that. We heard back, and they said, well, you can do it. 10,000 copies worldwide use of those 9 lines of lyrics under 3 conditions. One, you pay a $500 licensing fee. Done. Checks in the mail.
Not too bad.
Easy,
yeah. Second, any story that includes Morrissey's lyrics has to say inspired by the lyrics of Morrissey. Okay, that's going to be harder to do because the book's printed right now. But sure, we'll do that. Okay, 3, the other publishing company cannot get any money for this. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. Because I had heard rumors that the Smiths were going to reunite for Coachella, and they were going to get a $1 million paycheck to go to Coachella or whatever. And I'm like, if they can't agree over $500, there's no way they're going to Coachella to play music. I mean, this is $500 that for a book that's probably not going to, we're probably going to print 1,000 copies. We ended up printing 1,800 copies. But that pretty much, in comparison to Coachella, no one's going to see, you know? So I was like, okay. So I reached out to the guy and said, well, what's the likelihood of this happening? And he said, you know what? We work with their lawyers all day. You know, this isn't the only split publishing agreement. So I'll tell you what, I'll reach out to them and see what I can come up with. So he reached out to them. He reached out to Johnny's Marr's people say, yeah, we got this request and we don't know what to do with it. Which floors me, because they do that with books all the time.
Yeah.
But a comic book, which is basically just words and pictures, they don't understand what to do with it. Probably because they understand publishing a little bit better, of like how many copies are going to be printed and you know, whatever. And whereas they don't know that portion of the comic book industry. And so
they got to talk to Kiss and start putting some blood in that ink. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, Gene Simmons knows what he's doing for sure. I'm sure he's got that all worked out on how much he's willing to sell his soul for. So
I love it. So how like, so you're talking to Johnny Marr's,
right? And they said, we don't know what to do with it. If you can make money off of it, go ahead. And so I said to them, I need a copy of that email, and I'll send you a $500 check, but I do need a copy of that email so that if anything comes down, you know, I'm clear on this. And he did. Awesome. I sent the check cashed, got the email, and from then on, I decided I'm not going to put any lyrics in any of the books. I'm going to make sure we're going to try to get around whatever we have to do, so that I don't have to deal with the bands anymore.
I was going to say, other than the time it took, though, it seemed, I mean, I'm just amazed that it was like $500.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the weird. Yeah, I mean, like what Sean's talking about is not far off. Like I mean, Simon and Garfunkel's huge, and like I mean, I think it was like $200 or something because it wasn't a huge quote when they finally got back to me. But by the like, he's not wrong. Like, very similar thing. I got sent to like 5 different people, and then finally, by the time I heard back, it was like 6 months after publication. I'm like, I can't like do that. It's Anyhow, that's
well, I mean,
interesting.
and I
I'm
think
glad I
that's
wasn't
why
alone.
that's why I think why books and books take so long to produce, not just from the marketing standpoint and having a slot and whatever, but I'm sure they're not the only ones. I know Stephen King uses a lot of different quotes and music notes, so I'm sure, but I mean Stephen King, so I'm sure he gets a lot of
he has
quickly
doing
approval.
that.
But even so, I mean, I'm sure that's why things take so long, and why some of the guerrilla comic book creators out there, I mean, wouldn't be able to do that. But one thing that I did find out that was worth all of the $500 that I spent on alone is that song titles cannot be copyrighted. And so if you use a song title as the title of a story or something, then it's free game. Which I always wondered, because I remember seeing like comic books where the title would be the title of a song, and I was like, wow, that's interesting, because I'm sure Time Warner and Disney don't want to get sued by music companies for that. So so that's I mean, that's how I got the rights to that. So moving forward, no lyrics. So we move on to the Pixies. And the Pixies.
By the way, sorry, before you get into that, I'm glad you kind of decided to bail on doing the lyric rights, because I was realizing like you're going from one band that has a contentious relationship when it comes to rights, right to like one of the most other notorious, like Kim Deal and Frank Black, like can't see eye to eye on anything. That would have been probably pretty hard to organize as well.
I mean, part of the reason too, I picked like really bands that have like a, not necessarily a cult following, but they have a very set audience for their music. And most of the bands that I was looking at also weren't currently touring at the time. So there was a period of time where the Pixies were broken up, and that was the time period that I was in when I was creating the Pixies book. They hadn't gotten back together and to have a concert, so any tours or anything like that. So but this, it was a totally different situation with the Pixies. I mean, the money for the Kickstarter wasn't as high. I think we were asking for 5,000 or something like that, and we barely got the goal. But as soon as we put it up and put it out on social media and the different contacts we had, we got a response from the Pixies.
Sweet.
It was from their manager. They reached out to me on Facebook, and he said, "Hey, this is a great idea. We're gonna put it on the Pixies official Facebook page."
Yes.
And just a great idea. I said, "Well, I'll send you copies as soon as it's done, and you tell me how many copies you want, and I'll send them." And so we ended up doing that book, and it did meet the goal. It wasn't a blockbuster, sort of thing. It wasn't through I think it was like 15K for the Smiths. And so this barely kind of met our goal, but it did. And so I sent them copies of each of the covers, because I had 3 different covers. And that was the Pixies. The Pixies, we didn't go through Canada. to do. We actually did at a local printer here in Phoenix,
Sweet.
who did black and white printing, because that book was saddle stitched, so it looked like a regular comic book. It was about 60 pages long, but still black and white, still working in black and white at that point. And so that was a good step. And so I've been progressively like more and more popular bands and more, you know, and I thought, okay, what do I want to do next? And I knew a number of people that were really into Nine Inch Nails, and I was personally a big fan of Nine Inch Nails.
Oh yeah.
And so that's what we did. And I've been trying to increase the complexity of each book in different ways. And so I decided that this was going to be an all color book. It was going to be a hardcover, and it was going to include pinups. So if I had an artist that I really wanted, but they could only give me a pinup, they couldn't do a story, then I would take what I could get. And so we did that book, and it was fairly popular with Kickstarter as well. It had a lot more challenges though, a lot more challenges, because I had committed to certain stories and certain songs and whatever. And I had to do a lot of cat wrangling and getting people to submit their stories, and just it was more and more of a challenge. And so it took me a year to put out that book after I had already collected the money and everything. And I didn't anticipate doing that. I wanted to have a quick turnaround. But it became more and more challenging. And we finally did it. That one was printed out of China. I found a U.S. broker who would work with the printers in China, and that worked out pretty well. I got like the
Wait, this wasn't printed recently though, was it?
No, it was not.
Okay, yeah, because I was like, in the last 2 years, printing in China could have been a logistical nightmare.
No, it wasn't. This
shipping delays. Yeah.
This was 2014 was the Kickstarter.
Okay.
And 2015 was the what was when it actually came out. It came out in July 2015 is when we got the books.
Amazing.
So, but that had its own challenges because we were going back and forth. So like anytime I got like the galley copies and I'd look through them, and maybe I might find a mistake or something, so then I'd have to make the changes. But we finally got them in July of 2015. And that book, that was, how many copies did we have? It was probably around, I think it was 2,500 copies. And so after distributing all the copies and everything to everyone, those started slowly selling. And then I saw on Amazon or something, you know how some of the book dealers will overprice books.
Yes.
But it had, at one point, the only copy that was available was $1,000. But legitimately, the book probably, it was a 25. For the Kickstarter contributors, it was $25 plus shipping. But and we had a couple of editions that were $50 because they were more limited and they had special covers. We had 4 different covers for the book. But legitimately, it's probably $100 book right now if you wanted to find a copy.
Nice.
Did you save some copies, I hope?
I do have a few copies. I usually keep at least 3 copies of each book, just for my archives or whatever.
It's awesome.
But
I think you kind of have to, because I mean, like, I don't think most people who get into publishing or creating comics aren't doing it for the love of comic books and the actual book. So, like, keeping a printed copy of this thing that you accomplished and put together and stuff like that is like half the fun of it. I think that's half the reward.
Yeah.
Because not most of us aren't doing this stuff to get rich, you know, like, so
Right.
yeah.
I mean, you have your rare occurrences where, like James O'Barr with the Crow, or or the guys that put the Mystery Men or the Men in Black comics together. I mean, those guys are probably doing pretty well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not those chances of being Eastman and Laird with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are not that frequent. So, but yeah, so we did a hardcover version in 2015, and then I still had some people that wanted to do some stories and pinups, so I started collecting those and putting that together. And I actually did a Kickstarter to do another hardcover that would include all of those, because the first book was 256 pages. And I had enough to put together a pretty substantial book as a second volume. And it didn't, the Kickstarter got about 15K, and I needed 20K to legitimately do it. And so I was like, oh geez. So now I got to regroup. And this is like 2018. And so I decided at the time, Trent Reznor was not putting out, he wasn't putting out albums. He was putting out EPs. And, you know, and I thought, well, maybe I can use his sort of model for putting out music in the comic books and just split them up into different anthologies, and like take some of the similar artwork and tone and put it into 4 different volumes of 30 pages each. And so that's why I ended up doing, we have, and with that, I was able to take the people, like one of the people who did the main story, and have them be the cover artist for that. So like, the image you guys used for this podcast today is a gentleman, Man House, who did the art for one of the stories, and he's gotten a little more acclaim since when we used him, but I see him in quite a few different indie comics. But so we split up into a couple different ones, each one using a different song title or song excerpt in it as the cover. I was able to get Ben Templesmith to do one of the covers, even though he doesn't have art in any of them. But I had been hounding, because I knew he was a Nine Inch Nails fan, so I had been hounding him for years to do something, a pinup, a story, whatever he wanted to do. And I got him to do a cover. And
awesome.
So all the covers that we've been doing, starting with the Nine Inch Nails hardcover, the original hardcover, are wraparound covers, which you see sometimes in comics, but not that often. Mostly those are for like specialty variants and things like that, where they do wraparounds. But I thought it was important.
Awesome.
So
that's so cool to do, like hardcover books, and then also to like kind of go that extra mile to like make them really just kind of a special thing that'll hopefully accrue in value. That's really interesting.
Yeah, the individual comics were saddle stitched. And I actually went through a couple different companies to do that, because this is like 2018, 2019, moving into 2020.
Got it. Okay.
I used a company called Avenue 5 who does all of the first book I did through China, and we actually did a glow in the dark cover as one of the covers.
Oh, cool.
And then the next book I went through Avenue 5, which is based out of, I think it's Michigan. And they do all of Image Comics comic books. So I
Nice.
had them, I said, just give me the image stats, for the cover and the weight and all that. So each of the books has a different kind of feel to it too.
Nice.
And the last two books I did through Mixam, which I think also has kind of a Canadian component. So, and that turned out really nicely as well. So, I kind of like looking at the different the different printers and seeing, what makes sense for now and for what I'm doing and how many
Yeah.
pages and everything.
That's awesome. It's hard to find good printers, and when you do, it's like it's very a very enjoyable experience. And then I will say, like the more you kind of get into doing printing, like you're describing, it's like when you're at a con and you go by like a booth. Like one of my favorite people to stop by if I'm at like an indie show is like Secret Acres, because they always use these like super small family run like print shops that get like they do this stuff that's like I saw like a cover that used like flock on it, like flocking, and I was like, I've never seen that, and like, but I don't know if I would appreciate that as much had I not like kind of done some books, and then you see the process, you really appreciate good production on books, and it seems like all the printers you've named, it sounds like they're really good quality printers, which is a good thing to like care about when you're making comics. You want them to be like good, return for the people buying them. That's really cool. Well, I don't know, Scott, like, did you have questions kind of regarding like the music influences and stuff? Because I'm kind of curious about that, as
Yeah, I definitely, I know, and we're getting towards the end of the episode. I wanted Shawn to talk about, he kind of teased before the show what he's got in the works next. But yeah, I mean, the thing is like because I don't know, Shawn, he may have reached out to me, but a lot, I'm kind of embarrassed to say, but a lot of the bands I don't want to say I'm not a fan of. I just, when they were when they came on the scene, I was way into hip hop, and I just never kind of backtracked. There's a lot of bands that I did backtrack and kind of that, went back and checked out, but those are a few that I haven't. But the next one that he's doing, I definitely know. So, but yeah, I don't know. Do you want to tease that at all, Shawn?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I mean, basically, like I've kind of alluded to, I've gone from more obscure bands to more popular bands and well-known bands, and Nine Inch Nails was kind of that level. I mean, I actually tried reaching out to Trent like for a number of years through different methods, and could never reach him. But the hope was always to get to a band that's more of a brand.
yeah.
And actually, this is a good story to tell before if we have time.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
I have a story about what could have been, and it's, so one of my buddies is a really big fan of Iron Maiden, and I'm not a huge fan of Iron Maiden.
I'm a fan of their album covers. I used to love their album covers, but a few of the songs.
The album covers always scared me away from listening to them. But I'm not a huge fan of them, but he really is, and I was like, wow, if Jesse, this Jesse James who owns Jesse James Comics, and I'm like, man, because he's always talking about Up the Irons and Run for the Hills and all this stuff about Iron Maiden, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not really into it, but I think we could do something really cool with it and have like a book per an album and do it chronologically. and maybe the book has some of the songs as pinups and some of them as stories, so that we can limit it to 20 pages. And I'm like, yeah, I think I have a mode that we could do this in. And every 3 months we put out a book, and just build this machine, that goes through. And so I thought, I'll reach out to Iron Maiden. They are more of a brand than they are a band anymore. They still put out albums, but all the t-shirts and all that's everything that they do is probably makes up more of their sales than they do their albums do anymore.
Yeah.
Especially with Spotify and all that stuff going on. So I reached out to them. I said, hey, I'm doing this thing. I've done it with other bands where I'm doing books inspired by the songs of different bands. And I wanted to reach out to you to see if the band would be interested at all in any level of participating, or, licensing the use of Eddie, or, whatever. I'm interested. I'm going to be doing this book, but if I can have your participation in some manner, then that would make it even better for the fans, because these are love letters to the bands. And so I sent them the letter, and then I mailed out copies of the books, including the hardcover, the 9 Inch Nails hardcover, and I mailed it off to them. And I got because they're from England, right? The UK at least. I got a very polite cease and desist letter, probably the politest thing that you could get or hope for a cease and desist letter. And basically it said, we appreciate your enthusiasm and that you're a fan of the band and everything, but we already have plans to do an Iron Maiden comic book, and it's of high quality. And
oh man,
they hadn't received the books yet because I had just shipped them out, and it takes a while to get to England. To which I replied, yeah, I understand. I think you'll find my books are high quality as well. But if you don't want to participate, I understand. And so I kind of dropped it at that point. I've considered doing it again and just saying, okay, we're just going to call it, Up the Irons Volume 1 and Volume 2 and Volume, not include the band's name in it, but have enough allusion to it that people would know that it was inspired by Iron Maiden. But I've since dropped that. But yeah, that was my first experience dealing with a band that was a brand.
It's like there's those huge like Elvis, Misfits, Maiden, like
Metallica.
The stuff, the logos that kids are like scratching on their desks in like in junior high. Those bands tend to be really litigious with when it comes to like licensing and stuff, because that's their bread and butter. Like they make a crap load, and they usually have like 50 outer firms that sell licensing packages, and it's insane. I have a couple friends who do like event posters or t-shirt art, and it's like just to get t-shirt rights, it's always weird. It's always like per run. It's like this whole weird just chaos. But that is hilarious to me. That is both polite and also like the most passive aggressively rude.
And that's the English though. I mean, that is the English summed up: passive aggressive and polite.
I love that. That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I want to know where this heads. I'm curious what came after that Scott's so excited about.
So, one of the bands that I've been working toward, which is a band that's a brand,
Kiss, because by the way, if that's what you're thinking.
No, it's not. No, it's not. But my T-shirt. Let me see.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay. That's my late teenage years. I
Yeah.
very much would be into a comic.
Yeah, so Nirvana is like one of my favorite bands of all time. I never got to see them live.
Just a music nerd question: what's your favorite Nirvana album?
Geez, I had Nevermind on cassette.
Yeah.
And anytime I go on bike ride or whatever, it was constantly on play. So I think that's the thing that's etched most into my mind. Although one of my favorite songs is actually on Bleach, but yeah. So after doing all these anthologies and everything, there were times when I didn't have enough time because I was working on these books to actually write a story for the book itself. So there are times when I published books that didn't have any of my work in them at all. And anytime I'd like hint at a band that I was going to work on, I'd get like 20 people that would message me saying, I got dibs on this, I got dibs on that. And it's like, oh geez, this book's 6 months out before I even start planning it, and you're calling dibs on things. And as I started to progress further and further along, I also got more high profile people working on the books.
Yeah.
So, as much as I'd love to use the same, 10 people that I had from the beginning, as you get more and more people coming on, you want to give them an opportunity to be part of the book as well. So, I've kind of decided that for this next book that I'm going to write all the stories, and I'll get people to draw them. And I already have a number of pinups inspired by the different songs, and I have a cover, and the cover is by someone who's recently passed away, Neil Adams. So in 2018, I got to work with Neil and his people to create this this cover, and it's like nothing that Neil normally does, because it doesn't really have a lot of, it doesn't have superheroes in it. It actually doesn't have a lot of people in it, but basically his son cobbled together different images from different albums and artwork and images for the band, and Neil put together this beautiful cover. And so it's not colored at this point, and I still have to write the stories for it, but that's the next thing I really want to work on. And I had tried reaching out to Chris and to Dave. I don't know. At this point, Courtney doesn't own any of the rights to Kurt's legacy. Yeah, I think Francis Bean currently owns the rights. So, but it's going to be interesting. I'm going to have to be really on my toes, and really be. Because there is no Nirvana anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm really going to have to be careful about this book and make sure that it holds up to what I've been doing for these last 11 years of being a love letter to the band. So
that sounds amazing. I want to comment on just something in the chats, because I agree with this. Gary had said that the correct answer for the best albums Unplugged in New York. And then Christopher Runciman came in with the heavy hit, which is the best Nirvana album, which is In Utero. But anyhow, because Steve Albini, which also ties back to the Pixies, because I'm a music nerd. Anyhow, Shawn, I just love Albini's production. Like he puts the drums like extra loud, and it sounds very live and like real.
Well, you don't really need to do that with David Grohl's drums, though.
That's
I mean, 'cause
true.
I think he has to like. I think with some of the albums, some of the songs they worked on, he had to be very sensitive to,
Yeah,
because there are some ones where the vocals are really low and you can't have the drums playing loud on that. So,
truth.
but
Yeah, and Grohl like bangs the crap out of those things. I am really excited about that. I think aesthetically that's going to be interesting. Neil Adams doing a Nirvana influenced piece is really interesting to me. Like I love Neil Adams, but that sounds very left field from like his realm, and that actually makes me really excited to see it, because it's like what is that going to look like? I need to know. That's amazing. Wow, and so you're putting that together. I guess my last question, that obviously Scott probably has a bunch, but it's like, I guess my last question would be like, what keeps you motivated amid the chaos of organizing anthologies? Like how do you, like, what is the thing that keeps you at it? Because it definitely is, it sounds like you're making a lot of beautiful books, but also you're wrangling a lot of people dealing with heavy logistics.
yeah.
What is the, is it the desire to kind of do more love letters for more bands, or is it the love of comics? Like, what do you think it is that kind of keeps you rocking
Well,
this?
I definitely have a love of comics, but I think it's really putting together a book that I would want to see. Um, you know, I think sometimes that it's you you tend to focus on what issues you're having right now, but at the end of the day, it's like I'd want to see this book if I went to a bookstore or a comic book store and saw it on the shelf. I would be really excited to see this, and that's the kind of book that I want to put together. So I think that's the main thing. You know, also, I mean, at some point, you're doing working on um, utilizing the work of your idols, and it'd be nice to be able to have them acknowledge that at some point. I mean, I got that with the Pixies, so I guess 1 out of 3 is not bad. So, but you know, just to see if they liked it or not, or you know, whatever. Um,
That's
but
awesome.
yeah, I think we might have gotten that with Morrissey too, because I don't think he would have agreed to
Yeah,
it unless he liked what he saw, at least from the images that we sent him. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, that is. I mean, and I'm so glad we had you on, because I mean that's. I mean, I was just kind of fascinating every aspect of it. I mean, we could keep talking about it. We'll definitely have to have you on again. But especially when you get kind of closer to publishing another, the next anthology and everything, and then we go a little more deeper into, the process of putting that together, or whatever. But yeah, from the world record to just the whole, I just, I knew a little bit about, kind of, because I've talked to you about it, because I think I probably even reached out to you when I was doing my, when I was doing my comic based on music, and
yeah,
that's probably why I decided not to put lyrics in it, talking to you, but just all the backstory and everything, and it was really interesting. So, but yeah. So is there anything else before we close out? We'll give you a chance to pitch anything again, but anything that we didn't touch on that you definitely wanted to get in there before we start closing things out, Shawn?
No, I think we've kind of made the rounds between all the books and kind of the history of my work in comic book anthologies. So yeah, I think we're at a good place.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So we'll start off with you, Josh. Then where do you want people to go as far as social media? Anything you want to pitch?
Awesome. Yeah. Just to make it interesting. So the book that I was talking about having a music section that I took out is Jacob's Apartment. And so I would encourage you guys to buy it. It's a good book. It's a doomed romance story in the vein of Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind or Ghost World, very like slice of life for ages 16 and up. But I'd also love to hear if you guys did pick this up and you're like a fan of our show or whatever. If you guys own this, I want to hear your guess on what sequences had that music. Because what's weird is my editor and myself were really nervous about taking it out, and then the second we took the music out, where it was kind of flowing throughout the panels, it worked. But I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts. And also, make sure you guys, if you're in Southern California, come to my signing on Saturday at 1 to 5 at Barnes & Noble in Palmdale.
All right. And what about you, Shawn? Where do you want to send people to?
Yeah, so my books are available on Amazon or on eBay, both priced about the same on either of those platforms. So if you use either of those platforms, and the best way to do it is to do a search for Spaz Dog Press, SPAZDOG, one word, Press, PRESS. So that's the best place. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at SpazDog24 because SpazDog was taken. Twitter is at SpazDog. And then we have a couple of SpazDog Press Facebook pages as well. So,
yeah, I know the Twitter and the Instagram are listed in the description, as well as a clickable link to spazdog.com. So definitely check that out. Yeah, I mean, just awesome stuff that Shawn's doing. So as far as me, you can find me here on this channel, or you go to my website at circworks.com. And here's if you aren't already subscribed to my mailing list, go to circworks.com and click on, there's a link to get the free Comic Maker Starter Kit. And with that, you'll get the starter kit, and that you'll be on the mailing list, because I'm going to be talking about the upcoming Kickstarter and everything. And I'll show you, I guess I could show you guys this. So I got some advanced copies of the new issue, and this one actually has a remark on it. So there will be an early bird tier that I will let people know about for the Kickstarter, where you can get like a remarked copy of the new issue. And plus, all the other previous issues will be available. I'm going to have some cool variant covers by some awesome artists. One of them is on the show. So yeah, if you just sign up for the mailing list, and you'll be the first to know when I'm ready to go get ready with that Kickstarter and everything. But besides that, I just want to thank our guest Shawn. I want to thank the chat. I want to thank my co-hosts, and let everyone know that if you like the show and you want to continue watching the show, we have another mailing list for the show. We don't spam or anything like that. All we do is about 30 minutes before we go live, we send out an email with a link. We'll tell you who the guest is. We'll tell you what the topic is, all that stuff, because the show can be a little hard to follow if you're not really in the know, because it rotates from Josh's channel to my channel to typically Corey's channel. Corey's kind of laying low. There was some questions about where's Corey in the chat. He's just right now, he's just taking it easy after that, after the health issues and everything, but nothing to be alarmed about. He'll be back when he's ready. So, but all this is just to say that if you want to know whose channel it's going to be on, because the show rotates and all that stuff, typically it's Thursday nights, but that can change too. So the best thing to do is join that mailing list for the show. And like I said, we just send out an email with the link and everything. So that's the easiest way to navigate all that. And you can find that link in the description of this video as well. So again, thanks everyone in the chat, and we will see you next week. I assume on Josh's channel. We'll see you guys then. Thanks everyone.
Thanks guys for having me.
Thank you, Shawn.
Absolutely.